Welcome to Mi Gente on Air on 100.5 and 790 News Radio WSGW and online WSGW.com. Now, here is your host, Larry Rodarte.
Good evening and welcome to Mi Gente on Air. I want to thank our listeners as we continue to promote contributions of our Latino community. I hope everyone is staying warm in these bitterly cold January days in Michigan. On today's show, we're going to talk music. Music is the great unifier. We all know this. And it takes a special talent to be wrapped up in music throughout a lifetime. I have a special guest who started playing music very young, way back in the early 1960s, and helped start a rock group that has cemented their status in rock and roll history. They are called the greatest garage band ever. He is a Mysterian, and his name is Robert Lee Balderrama, known affectionately as Bobby to many. Yes, he shot up the charts in 1966 with Question Mark and the Mysterians with the number one hit, 96 Tears. They were the cool band, and the Mysterians, well, were mysterious. We all know this, right? Their song hit among other number ones at the time by the Four Tops and the Monkees. It really was an incredible feat for 5 Latinos from the Saginaw Bay region. And after 55 years, Bobby is climbing the charts again with his current hit, Any Moment, with Lasonic, as Robert Lee is featured in a style of music he has always loved, jazz. So please help me welcome Saginaw music legend, Robert Lee Balderrama, known as Bobby, to Mi Gente on Air. Welcome, Bobby.
Well, thank you, Larry, for having me on the show.
Wow, it's amazing to me that after all this time, 55 years, you're still doing music, but this is like your 7th decade.
Yep.
Right? 7 decades in music. Bobby Balderrama.
Yep. I was listening to my parents play when I was 3 years old. You know, my dad played guitar, so yeah, you could say 7
Yeah. You know, Bobby, we're living in a whole different world
Yeah.
from 1966. And I say 1966 because that was the year that 96 Tears actually went to number one in October. And, you know, you've had this longevity in a career of music. How does it feel for you as Any Moment, the jazz song that you have out there right now, is climbing the charts? How does that feel for you?
You know, I've been in the music business most of my life, and I've always wanted to have a hit record. And I was hoping that Question Mark Mysterians could have kept on going, you know, and have hit records. But, you know, the reality is it didn't. And so I love playing guitar, and playing jazz guitar was always my venture, you know, but it was way above my head when I was 12 years old. Yeah. I would listen to Wes Montgomery and I go, what is he doing, you know? And then Tel Farlow and Charlie Christensen. And then all of a sudden George Benson comes out, you know? So it's been a great life playing music. I wish, you know, like I said, the Question Mark Mysterians could have had more hits, and but we didn't.
But, you know, I want to give credit where credit is due, because if you've actually listened to many of the songs, you know, so many times I think the misinformation out there is that you guys were a one-hit wonder. That is not true at all, because if you listen to Cherry July, Do Something to Me, 18, I mean, those were all songs. Even Smash Mouth came out with one of your hits.
Can't Get Enough of You, Baby.
Can't get enough of you, babe. I mean, tell me, there were at least on that one album that was the 96 Tears album, probably a good 5-6 hits.
Well, you know, we did have songs that got played on the top 40, and like you mentioned, I Need Somebody, Can't Get Enough of You, Baby, Do Something to Me. All those songs were in the top 40.
Yeah.
Now, because we had a number one hit, we had to match up to it to be and then have another hit. You know, I remember watching. It was about 10 years ago. William Shatner. He was my favorite artist back then. And I used to love to watch Star Trek when I was a kid. We would be traveling, and Star Trek would come on, and it'd come on kind of in the afternoon, you know, late in the afternoon, and we had to get ready to go play. We were on tour, and I'd tell the guys, wait 10 more minutes, I'm just going to finish watching it, you know, because William Shatner and Spock were my favorite actors. So I would say about 8 to 10 years ago, he had a show called The One Hit Wonders. and he was the host. And I was just watching it, and all of a sudden, boom, there we were, one hit wonder. And I'm thinking, okay, people are classified as one hit wonder band, and so does William Shatner. But you know what? I kind of took it with stride because William Shatner was my favorite actor, and just to hear him say Mysterians, it was like we made a connection,
Yeah. I mean, it's not necessarily a bad thing
No.
to be a one-hit wonder, but
No.
I still refute that because I am a fan of much of your music,
Yeah,
and
thank
I
you.
have listened and have grown with that through the years, all my life.
Uh-huh.
And it's just absolutely not true in my book. And
Right.
I'm sure many people and any fans of Question Mark and the Mysterians are going to know that 96 Tears was not your only hit, although
Right.
that one was such a huge
Huge,
hit that you were
yeah.
always going to be compared to that.
And we were.
Yes.
And when we were on that show and I was watching it, and he mentioned us and they played 96 Tears, he talked about 90, the song. And then the next one artist he brought up was Jimi Hendrix. And I was like, wow, Jimi Hendrix, and it was All Along the Watchtower. And that
Wow.
song never made number one. It was number 20, but he was classified as a one hit wonder. So that's kind of crazy because he never had a one hit. But I see the way it's looked at it. If you reach to a certain number and that's in the top 40 and you can't reach it again, then I guess you're considered a one hit wonder no matter where you are, what number you are, if you understand what I'm saying.
Well, I remember the movie The Things You Do with
Right.
Tom Hanks.
Yep.
You remember that
Yeah.
movie? That I think it was in the 2000s, early 2000s.
Yeah.
And I swear that was your story. That was Question Mark and the Mysterians story.
It was.
And I was really surprised to see that, but I was glad to see that even if it wasn't, you guys weren't given the recognition,
Right.
it was still your story. And
Yeah.
those that know.
It was. I can remember, when I was a kid, and I'd wait for the school bus to pick me up. I lived in Bay City, Michigan, and I lived out in the country. My parents had a farm, and I'd be seeing the bus lights would be dark and early in the morning, and I'd be listening to the radio, and I'd hear all these great songs on there, and then I used to think, what it would be like to have our song getting played, and then all of a sudden, it's 1966, I'm listening to the radio and the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, and all of a sudden our song comes on, and it starts hitting the charts, and I'm thinking, wow, that's great. Our song is on the same radio. I can hear coming out the same speaker. It's more of a physical thing, and mentally too, and we're right there with the Rolling Stones and the Beatles.
Right. And that's why I say you guys have really cemented yourselves in rock and roll history.
Yep.
Because nobody can ever take that away from
That's right.
Question Mark and the Mysterians, 96 Tears. So, let's listen. Let's go back a little bit. Tell
Okay.
me your background. Tell me who is Robert Lee Balderrama,
Okay.
and where did the Balderrama name come from? I can't even say.
Yeah, the Balderrama name came from, it's a Spanish name.
Mhm.
I'm Mexican. That's my heritage. And my parents were migrant workers, and they would drive up from Texas to Michigan and work out in the fields. And my dad and my brothers, they got jobs, General Motors, so we found out what the good life was.
Mhm.
So my parents, and my brother, they bought a farm out in Bay City, and they were musicians. My brother played in a polka band here in Bay City, and he played with a lot of Polish people there, and it was great to hear him. I used to go watch him practice, and he would show me licks and stuff. My dad showed me. So I grew up with a very influential, music background from my family. And I have a cousin, Enrique Balderrama, in San Antonio, very famous. He had a band, and I can't remember the name of the band, but he did movies, Spanish movies and stuff. And he was very popular. And I think it was like in the 70s, he was really climbing high,
And so tell me about Larry Borges. He was also your
Yep.
cousin. Is it the same family line?
Yeah, it's my sister's son, and he's older than me. I was when I was born. My mom had me when she was like in her late 40s. My dad was in his 50s.
So you were kind of like the mistake.
I was a mistake. My dad was still going strong.
Yeah. I say that because they used to always say that about me. I'm the youngest of four, and my closest sibling to me is 5 years older, and they always referred to me as the mistake.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was like all my family except for my older brother Jerry, me and him, were kind of like late, and everybody moved out. So my sister got married before I never lived with her, with my parents. And she got married and she had kids, and Larry was one of them, Larry Borges. And me and him used to jam playing guitar all the time. We practiced at the farm, and then we practiced at his house in the basement. And one day, she had mentioned, she goes, "You guys should start a band." And I'm thinking, what a great idea.
And wait, how old were you then?
12.
12 years old. Can you imagine?
And I was learning ventures. We were playing the band. Larry loved the Beatles. I loved the Rolling Stones. So we would play their stuff too. They did, a few instrumentals, the Rolling Stones, but we would just play the music, and then we played Wipeout or whatever. And then one day, Robert Martinez showed up with Fred Cruz, and they had a set of congas. And Fred Cruz was getting on the congas, and he started playing them. And I could see, his hands were getting tired and everything. And he goes, "I think I'm going to sue. I'm going to ruin my hands here, And so I said, and so he handed him over to Robert, and Robert started playing. And I go, "Wow, this guy's got a beat." I could tell Robert he had a good tempo. And we started playing all these instrumentals, and Robert playing with us. I told Robert, I said, it'd be great if you get a set of drums. So he told me his brother-in-law, Eddie Serrato.
Oh, wow.
He played in the Tejano band, and he said he let me borrow him. And Robert said I told him we could practice over my parents' house in the garage. So we were a garage band. In reality, my parents had a 2-car garage. We put the car in one side of the garage, and we practiced on the other side. And we would practice. My dad was a farmer, and he was all right with it. But we would practice late in the night, like 9 o'clock or 10. And we was out in the country. Nobody lived close by us. And he would complain, and my ma, I could hear him through the window trying to sleep, and my ma said, "Fidencio, cállate," He let them practice,
Cállate.
Cállate. Let them practice. They're not getting in trouble, So I said, I told the guys, "This is really great. We should start learning the ventures, playing them together." We started getting some gigs. And what was really crazy is it was so much fun playing instrumentals. I loved instrumentals because I love listening to Wes Montgomery, and he was always instrumental jazz. So instrumental rock and roll was kind of like, I love jazz more, but I couldn't play it, so rock and roll I could play. So I played that, and we did a couple of gigs, and people kept saying, "Well, who sings in the band?" I go, "Oh, shoot, here we go." They ruined my instrumental career, So.
And this is 1962.
Yeah, 1962.
Wow.
We practiced about 8 months, and then we went out and did a couple of gigs, and then everybody kept saying, "Well, you guys got to sing," And I think, well, I don't want to sing. I just want to play my guitar. I wanted to be like the best guitar player in the world. Every guitar player has that goal. Just to put that into their goals of things to do. So. Robert mentioned, I told Robert, I said, we need to get a singer. So Robert said, my brother sings. I said, "Who's your brother?" He said, "Rudy." And Robert, last name was Martinez. And he said, "Rudy sings, and he dances." I go, "Wow." And I'm thinking, Mick Jagger. And so Question Mark came over. We always call him Rudy. And Rudy came over, and we tried him out. And I told Robert, I said, "Wow, he's a great singer." I didn't know singing at all, So, I know he wasn't a great singer, but to me he was. But he could dance. I mean, he could dance better than Mick Jagger. He would dance like a girl, and his hips would be moving around. Then he did the splits and everything. And I said, "We got to hire him." So I told Larry, "We got to hire this guy," And he says, "All right." So I told Robert, I said, "Yeah, we want him in the band." So Question Mark started showing up, and we started practicing, and we learned the Rolling Stones stuff. We learned Beatles, and we learned all the big hits, and we started playing out, one day of practice, we should take some time off on Saturday afternoon, and we were watching this show, Godzilla, Godzilla, old Japanese movie.
Yeah.
Well, there was a show called The Mysterians. And we were watching it, and it was these invaders from Mars, and they were stealing all the women from Earth. And anyway, Larry said, "That's a great name." And I'm thinking, I don't know, And so I thought about it for 2 days, a couple of days. I kept saying, "And here they are, the Mysterians," And I go, "Wow, it does have a good ring to it." So I told Larry, I said, "Yeah, that's a good name." So we decided to use the name, the Mysterians, and then we met this guy. We were playing for the GI Forum. You remember the GI Forum?
The American GI Forum,
Yep.
yes.
And we met. It was the last name. Who was
Zuniga?
the Zunicas? Yeah, and the family there, and they hired us. And we met a guy named David Torres.
Oh, the artist.
The artist, yeah.
Yes.
And he worked for Midland. He was a great artist. And he came up to me. He said, I want to talk to you guys, about something. So we did. We had a meeting. It was called Richie's Drive-In on Genesee, and we had a meeting with him. And he told us he wanted to be our manager, and he drew these pictures of us. Great big. He was the art. He would draw these great big pictures.
Phenomenal artist.
Oh, great
Yes,
art.
yes.
And he had us dressed up in these mariachi outfits, and with the big sombreros, And I loved the pants with the conker shells, what it's called. And I fell in love with the pants, And I said, Dave, I said the hat's got to go though. I said I can't go on there and stay with a big sombrero. I could wear a hat, but that's ridiculous. I said, but I love the outfit. And he said, I want you to check this out. And he goes, I got these dolls for this year. If you don't like those, I got these other ones. So he had these other outfits, and they had X, Y, and Z on it. Then he had one that had question mark. He goes, you guys should be called question mark. He goes, you're question mark, and Bobby, you're X, and Larry, you're Z, and Robert, you're Y. So he gave us all a letter. And he said, don't tell anybody your names. Just keep it secret. And the question mark, he'd wear sunglasses a lot. So he said, keep your sunglasses on all the time. Don't let anybody know who you are. It could be incognito. And it was just a great idea that Dave came up with. So we would be playing out, and we were doing some, nice venues and stuff, teenage clubs. And people would come up we were playing in Adrian, Michigan for the GI Forum.
Wow.
And I met this one girl. She was gorgeous, and it was like, wow. And I was like 13, and I was starting to look at girls, And
her name was Donna. No.
Oh, it could have been.
Richie Valley.
Oh, Richie. And anyway, we're playing, right? And then we're done playing, and all these girls, I felt like we're like the Beatles or something. They were screaming and everything. And one came out to me and really cute, and she said, what's your name? And I said, X. She looked, and, the last thing you want to do is not impress a young girl, especially when you're young and you don't know how to react, you're still learning. And she looked at me and she goes, oh, you're weird. The way she said that, it just like, oh man, I just lost a fan, And so from that time on, I decided, question mark, you go ahead and use question mark. I'm Bobby or Robert or whatever.
Wow.
So that's how the band.
That's how it started.
That's how it started.
Wow, incredible. Well, all that led up to the major smash hit that we all know and love, the classic hit. Let's listen to the little bit of that in some footage from that time on American Bandstand.
For just a little while, and then I'm gonna put you way down here, and you'll start crying. 96 years, cry. And when the sun comes up, I'll be on top. You be right down there, looking up. And I might wave, come up here, but I don't see you waving now. I'm way down here, wondering how I'm gonna get you, but I know now I'll just cry, I'll just cry.
Wow. So what do you feel when you see that, Bobby, today? How many years later? 55 years later. What are you feeling?
I was so young, Larry, that I was just so excited to hear our song on the radio, like that movie you mentioned.
Yeah.
And to me, that was the biggest thrill. And the second one was meeting all these artists that we toured with, Rick Derringer. Met Rick. I hang out with him in the bedroom, a hotel room, and he would play my guitar, and I would watch him with amazement because I couldn't play like him. I was kind of embarrassed, because I was still learning. I was 16 years old. you know, and still learning guitar. And I didn't know blues that good. I mean, I saw Dick Wagner play some blues, and I'm thinking, God, he is great, you know. And to me, it was a learning experience of trying to capture all the information, you know, by watching the other artists. You know, to me, it was the best.
And here you are, a 16-year-old kid. How could a 16-year-old brain even process the greats that he was meeting at the time? I mean, you guys were really meeting some incredible artists. You were out on the West Coast. You were appearing on American Bandstand. You were appearing on Where the Action Is. I mean, these were the big shows of the day on television. Television was still relatively new. It's incredible that you, at such a young age, and you weren't even the youngest.
No, Frankie.
Frankie was the youngest at what, 13?
I was 16. He was 15.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So all that's happening in your young lives, and you shoot to #1 with 96 years. What did you feel that first time you heard yourself on the radio?
You talking about the song?
Yeah.
Yeah. It was an amazement. You know, I was thinking, you know, our dream came true. That's what I felt. You know, me and Larry, you know, when we started practicing together, you know, our dream was to be like the Beatles or Rolling Stones, you know, or, you know, all these great artists. And it was like coming true, you know. And to me, being a Mexican
of Mexican heritage,
yeah, that right there, it was a really kind of a, what would you call it, a stumbling part. You know, it was hard, you know, because a lot of places, you know, back in the 60s, you know, if you're Mexican, you know, you better stay away from him, you know, or he cut a knife or something like that.
Yeah.
You know, and so now I felt like we were breaking the ice.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we played with Sam DeSham and the Pharaohs, and he's Mexican.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't get a chance to meet Richie Valens because he died before that. But there was so many artists that were Mexican, but, you know, they kind of kept it hidden. You know, and what's his name, Johnny Rivers, you know, he's Mexican, Johnny Rivera.
Yeah.
You know, and so he changed his name. I mean, you know, I use Robert Lee because I used to work at a music store, and my boss said, "Hey, Robert Lee." And I go, "Well, that's a catchy name." But, you know, my name is Robert Lee Balderrama, and I always be proud of it.
Mm-hmm. And we always affectionately know you as Bobby.
Yeah, Bobby.
Bobby Balderrama.
And the reason I got that name was because we had two Roberts in the band. Robert the drummer, Martinez, and Robert Lee Balderrama, me. So question mark, you know, every time somebody would say Robert, would mean him would both look or what, you know. So Robert was like 4 or 5 years older than me. So he, question mark, said, "We'll call you Robert Martinez, but we call you Robert, and Bobby will call you Bobby, you know, it's Balderrama."
Mm-hmm.
And so that's how I became Bobby. You know, I never let my name get in a way, if you understand what I'm saying. I could call me Robert or Bobby or Robert Lee or Mr. Balderrama. You know, it doesn't make a difference. I think when you treat people with respect, you get it back.
Yeah. Well, I remember, probably about 15, 20 years ago, I started calling you up at your job over at the guitar shop, remember?
Yep.
And I would ask for Bobby Balderrama. They'd have you come to the phone, and I'd say, "Is this Bobby Balderrama from question mark in the Mysterians?" Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Every time I would call there, and then finally he would say, "What do you want, Larry?"
I knew it was you.
Yeah, exactly. But, you know, we're really fortunate here tonight to be able to talk to a Saginaw rock and roll legend right from within our midst, Bobby Balderrama. And we're going to go on break real quick, and we're going to come right back. And I want the audience to participate a little bit more. If you want to send us some comments, or you got questions for Bobby, go ahead, because we can read them here on this live feed here on Mi Gente On Air. We'll be right back.
This is Mi Gente On Air on WSGW.
On Facebook, I still don't see any like I did last week. You know how I had the comments? Yeah. Sorry. I don't know if you I can't even see how many are actually on there, but we're just really fortunate to have Bobby on here. Oh, I was looking at.
There's a 5-track lead in the new section.
Oh, okay. Wow. So it's pretty amazing technology today, and I'm still getting used to this. And one of the things I remember early on, I think I had to be like 3 years old, and I remember in my early years, I used to be on Hosmer Street a lot because of my Aunt Della Chantaka and my Uncle Jack Chantaka. And so we were always visiting over there. And when you would turn off their street, Hosmer, it was 17th Street, I believe. There was a house in the corner of 17th Street in, I want to say maybe, Bobby, maybe you can help me with this. I'm talking about in the 60s, and I'm a very young kid, and we would ride by from Hosmer Street. I think it was Ansley to 17th Street, and there was a house, a white house in the corner, a big white house. And every time we drove by there, they'd say, question mark and the Mysterians are practicing there. Whose house was that? Do you recall that? It was a white house, and it was on Perkins and 17th.
17th.
Across from the church that's there now. Somebody, if anybody out there in the Facebook listening world can help me with this. I see my cousin Juan Chantaka was on here. Maybe he can help me. Mariva Gonzalez says, my dad Ernie Reyes always talks about knowing question mark and the Mysterians. Yep. He has pics of him with members of the band, and
I remember Ernie.
Yeah, and so many people, and you know the generations from those that lived in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s. You know, our parents, you know, knew your parents.
Right.
They were comadres or compadres. You know, with 5 guys, Mexican guys in the band. You know, there had to be all kinds of connections.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and the GI Forum, it really made that connection too. You know, we met a lot of people there, and it was just a great time. My sister belonged to that, I think, and her husband.
And Lupe Zamora here, he's asking, what high school did you go to?
I lived in Bay City. I went to a 2-room school up to the 7th grade. Then I went to Bay City Central for a short time.
You did?
Yeah. I lived in Bay City, you know, but what happened was we sold, my dad had a couple bad years of farming, so we ended up selling the farm, and we moved to Saginaw, and we lived with my brother and his wife, and it was hard, you know, when you live with, you know, a family already, and me and my parents, and I used to pray to the Lord. I said, one of these days I'd like to buy a house for my parents. And during that time was when 96 years was hitting. I was going to Weber.
Oh, wow.
Weber middle school.
Yeah.
And I met Jack Nash, you know, and I met, you know, a lot of people. I got a funny story to tell you about that one. And anyway, our song made it shortly after school went out, you know, and I ended up buying a home for my parents out on Bloomfield Avenue off of Washington, South Washington.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yep.
Wow.
A brand new home.
Awesome. I've got Barbara Ontiveros on here. She says, oh my goodness, I remember seeing question mark and the Mysterians at the Golden Glow.
Yep.
They had teenage dances way back in the day, 65 or 66.
I remember playing there. You know, I can't give you dates, but we did play there.
Wow. Barb, you're going to have to share a picture of you in those days. In 1965, 66, I'm interested in that. John, my cousin Juan Chantaka says, I remember the house too, but sorry, I forgot who owned it. But there was a house, I'm telling you, on Perkins, and it was right there by the Harvest, which is the church today, Harvest Assembly of God. And every time we drove by there, I remember my sisters would say, question mark and the Mysterians are practicing there, or something, you know. I mean, you guys really had an impact from not only the young, but the teens that you were going to school with, or whatever, but also the adults, because I mean, everybody, this was a phenomenal thing. 5 Latinos from Saginaw, can you imagine, in the 60s going to the #1 spot on Billboard magazine? I mean, that was huge. And then to see you with Dick Clark, an American Bandstand, I mean, that was just unheard of. I mean, it was happening in, you know, with the Beatles, of course, and the Monkees, and you know, some of the other great groups. And here we had our own version of rock and roll legends that, you know, here we are 55 years later, and we're still talking about 96 years.
I know, because it was such a big hit, Larry. I mean, I went all over the world playing with Joe King. And I was telling you the story earlier where when I was playing with Joe King, we did a TV show in Paris, like the CBS Morning News, huge, goes all over France.
Right.
And Joe said, well, they want you to be on there with me. I said, all right. So we were on there, and they kept asking me questions, and the guy looking over past Joe, and they talking to me, and I had to apologize to Joe. I said, I'm sorry, that he was at. He goes, no, don't be. He goes, this is gonna help me out, Bobby. He goes, your band, Mysterians, in 96 years was such a big hit all over the world.
Yeah, and it was replicated by so many artists, even Aretha Franklin.
She did a marvelous job of it.
Yeah. Well, you know what? We have to go back live on the live stream. I don't think we're on live stream, right? This was just.
We're not recording this bit.
Right. We're not recording, but we got to go back into the recording part of it. So for all of you who are watching right now, you got a little bit more inside information from Bobby here about the great band ? The Mysterians, and the greatest garage band ever. And I got to witness a lot of that. So we're going to go back live right now here, and Chandler can pot us up, and we'll go back and do the show.
You're listening to Mi Gente on Air on WSGW.
Welcome back, Mi Gente. Thank you for being with me this evening here as we talk to one of Saginaw's great musicians who has cemented himself within the musical archives of history and rock and roll, and now in jazz with his new hit that is climbing the charts. And it's called what, Bobby? Any Moment. Well, as we continue on this show, I want to make sure that you explain to me a little bit more about your memory from American Bandstand, because the clips, are very short on YouTube today, and thank God they survived, because really it was the beginning of television in 1966. And it's in black and white. It's not even in color. And that show went on for years with Dick Clark. But, I've seen 18. You guys did 18 on there, the song 18. But I also, of course, seen 96 years. Yeah. What was it like for you? You were 16, 17?
I was 16 years old when we did American Bandstand.
Tell my listening audience a little bit about that experience.
Yeah. What we did is Neil Bogart was our producer. Turned out to be very main in the business, And anyway, he flew us out there, and we did American Bandstand, and I was so happy and excited to be on there. And really, our song hadn't made it in California yet, and so people didn't even know who we were, But he had an audience that said applause, so everybody applauded and stuff like that. And we did a show, and it was just a pleasure to meet Dick Clark. And he was such a really humble, nice guy, just no attitude, no ego, nothing like that. And to me, it was just the best thing that ever happened. And then I know always had a dream about being a dancer on American Bandstand.
Yeah. So
actually, he was an artist, on it, so which is better. And we did that, and we did Where the Action Is. And we got to know Paul Revere and the Raiders. Yeah. At Mark Lindsay, I still know him, and we're good friends, and we ran into each other many times. He didn't play with Paul Revere after a few years, but we became good friends, and he would come out to New York, and we would play, and he'd come out and hang out with us. So it was just a great time meeting all the artists on there, and Dick Clark, he hired us for a tour, and these major tours, and he had like the Mamas and Papas, just unbelievable bands, Strawberry Alarm Clock. Mm-hmm. I think it was one of the bands he managed, and he would have us on the show with them, and just to meet all these great artists, and just to talk, one to one. It was very at that, once we started doing the shows, you started getting used to it. and I would always go out there in front and watch, and just amazed watching these bands play. Then we had to go on, but it was a great life, just doing that touring.
Well, Where the Action Is, was that another Dick Clark show?
Yeah, it was another Dick Clark show. They would film off the beach or something like that.
The beach in California.
Yeah.
And if you go on YouTube, it's actually on there. If you Google or you search Where the Action Is, you can actually see *of the Mysterians performing 96
Yep.
Tears. And thank God that is in existence as well. But,
Yeah.
I want to just ask you a few questions because as of late, recently we have lost some greats also from that time period. And one of them, of course, was Ronnie Spector from the Ronettes. And we just lost Ronnie, I think, last week. And there was a video out there, I think it was in 2012, when she got on stage and performed with you in New York. Tell me about that.
Yeah, we were playing at the Lincoln Center with Mitch Ryder, and there was like a whole bunch of bands from Detroit. And so we were on there, and we were doing our show. It was just a great show, and it was packed. I mean, like Lincoln Center has an internal type stage, but they also have an outside format. And we were playing outside in the summertime, and we were doing 96 Tears at the end of our show. And all of a sudden, I see the lady comes up, and she's got a microphone, and I'm thinking, gosh, she looks familiar, She had his hair all over the place, and you couldn't really see her face really good until she looked right at me, and I go, that's Ronnie Spector. And of course, we're dancing around and everything, and he's not even paying attention. And then he looks at her, and I could tell he had the same feeling that he couldn't tell who she was. So she got right up on him, and she's like singing right there face to face.
In that voice.
Yeah, and he started singing, and started singing with her, and they were dancing together. They even, had this one little skit where he gets on the floor, and she got on the floor with him too. Yep. And you couldn't, if you see the video, you can't even see them. And then all of a sudden they get up and they start bouncing around. They're jumping up and down and everything. Yeah. And then finally she said, well, I think I had enough of this. And she walks off stage, and follows her, pulls her back on stage again.
Yeah. And if you're too young to know who the Ronettes were, many of my listeners probably are. Ronnie Spector, though, you'll know the voice because she sang that incredible
great
lick.
Voice.
It was "Be My Little Baby."
Yeah, she was in another song. Who was that rock and roll guy? Played saxophone. He passed away a couple of years ago. I can't think of his name. But it was, and she was on that song, and she would sing the "Be My" in that song,
Oh yeah, I remember that. I remember that well.
Yeah, in fact, he played here at the Ojibwe Island a couple of times.
Yeah,
wasn't
he the saxophone player for? Gosh, when we're trying to think of these names, all of a sudden your mind just goes.
Yeah, I can't think of it, but great singer.
Yeah,
great singer. Yeah.
We also lost Mike Nesmith. From the Monkees, and I mean, I want to bring that up because that was just last month in December.
Sad.
And what an incredible talent he was. The Monkees. They don't get a lot of the credit that I think they deserve. But Mike Nesmith, he wrote a lot of songs. One of the great ones that he did that is just one of my all-time favorites is the one that Linda Ronstadt sang.
Great writer.
A Different Drum. Her very first song that was actually written by Mike Nesmith. Do you have a memory from the Monkees at that time?
We never played with him, but I remember it wasn't Michael Nesmith. It was the bass player. What was his name? I can't think of it. Anyway, we were playing at Gazzari's. Remember, I was telling you earlier, we were doing our last third album in L.A. and we were recording at Ray Charles Studios. And a couple of times Ray Charles come into the studio, and him and Frankie would jam on the piano together. And it was just exciting. I wish I had a camera, But anyway, we were playing.
Peter Tork.
Peter Tork, yeah.
Yeah.
And we were playing at Gazzari's, and he walks in there and he's watching us play, And I go, that's the bass player for the Monkees. I didn't get a chance to say hi to him. He came in and left real quick. And what was really funny, we were playing at Gazzari's. I went in there during the day, I was walking around, and when we weren't recording, we'd go walking around. And anyway, I walked by Gazzari's, and I saw there was a Chinese band. They were all from China, and or Japan. I'm sure they were Chinese, and they were on stage and they were auditioning to play at Gazzari's. So I walked in to watch them. So I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden they started playing 96 Tears, wow. And that cracked me up. I go, wow! And they did a great job of it. And so I went up when they were done doing the audition. I went up to the guy and said, "Man, you sound really great." He didn't know what I was saying. It's really weird. They could learn to sing in English, but he couldn't understand when I was talking to him.
Wow.
Yeah, it was crazy.
I got to ask this question. Did you ever go to the Troubadour,
You talking about the one in?
California?
No, we played at the one in. It's in Canada. What's a town in Canada? It's not too far, but
Toronto.
Toronto. We played there at the Troubadour in Toronto, and I think what's his name? Steve Ray Vaughan played. There. A lot of major acts played there too. It was just a club venue, but it was very popular.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, it's like I said, so many artists copied the song. I mean,
Yeah.
not copied. What's the word I'm looking for? They actually did a cover.
A tribute.
A cover
Yeah,
of
a cover,
96
yeah,
Tears, Aretha Franklin, of course. And I've heard other versions. I've even heard it in Spanish.
Oh, yeah, me too.
And in one of the albums that I do have here in
Yeah.
the studio is, of course, the 96 Tears album, but it's in Spanish, the
Yeah.
whole thing, believe it or not. And how did this happen?
I don't know how that happened, but we did a recording. We were in New York City, and a good friend of mine, John Weiss, had a studio, and we recorded an album for him, and it was released. It was a bunch of songs we did there, and we did a lot of old songs, and then Question Mark sang 96 Tears in Spanish.
He did.
Yeah, did.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yep.
You know, I have some great pictures of you guys performing at Saginaw High way back in the day in the
Yeah.
auditorium, and there's all these young teenagers. And I know one of my cousins is sitting in the audience, Linda Orozco.
Oh,
And, do you actually remember that time? And I know one of the other bands that was performing that day was Johnny Estrada and John Orozco.
Yep.
And
Was it Sir David?
Sir David and the Knights,
Knights,
David
yeah.
Chintaka. Okay.
Yeah,
Do you remember?
David.
Tell me a little bit about that day, because that's
Yeah, it was exciting night because we were presented our gold records.
the 96 Tear Gold records.
Yeah, that's when we got it. Lily Gonzalez was our manager, and she and Neil Bogart from New York.
Wait, Neil was there at
Yeah,
Saginaw High?
Neil Bogart was there.
Wow.
Yeah, and Lily.
I just read a book on him
Yep.
because Neil Bogart went on to bring Casablanca Records.
Casablanca Records
Yes.
with Donna Summers,
Yep.
Kiss.
Yes. And so, I mean, he really had cemented his place in rock and roll history as well. And he was the one that got you over there at Greenwich Village for that photo shoot on the album cover.
Yeah, he did everything. Neil Bogart was really good to us. You know, I can't say about, I don't want to say nothing bad about, the business that went on. But,
Oh, we all know it sucked in those days.
well, record companies took advantage of bands and stuff like that. But anyway, he was always good to us.
Mhm.
And he's the one. He went with us to California to American Bandstand, and just treated us really good. And we did the album, in New York. No, we did it in Philadelphia at Cameo Parker Studios, and then we did the shoot there, like you said, by the Rocks. Everybody always asks, where was that shot at? So that was a great time. Neil Bogart went on to do great things. I talked to Jimmy Hollywood. I don't know if you know who Jimmy Hollywood.
Yes.
And Jimmy Hollywood said he was hanging out with Neil Bogart, and Neil Bogart took him to his home, and he showed him a record, 96 Tears, because Jimmy Hollywood was really involved in it too. He helped promote the song because he worked for WSAM, and Jimmy told me that he showed Neil showed Jimmy the gold record, and he said, that was my first gold record I ever had.
Wow.
So, and he went on to bigger things.
Well, Eddie Serrato, I remember going to his parents' house. Eddie took me there in 1996. His parents were still alive. They lived on, I think, in Lapeer. And they had that gold record up on the wall.
Wow.
It was such a great memory for them, and they honored that by putting that in their living room, in the family living room, and it really meant something to them.
It does.
Yeah.
It does mean a lot, To me, having it at home, I think right now I got my gold record and my plaque from Billboard #1 at the Bay City Museum on Washington there.
Right.
And they shown it there, and I'm gonna have it. I want them to have it for 4 or 5 years, and people can go there and look at the gold record, look at the plaque. They got T-shirts, you got pictures of the band, and it's at the Bay City Museum in Washington, right next to the City Hall, and they got a great display. Gary Johnson, he's got great display there of the rock and roll legends, Michigan legends, he's got all the bands and artists that made it from Michigan. And he did a great job of it, and we're just playing on Madonna's on there, you know.
Yeah, because 96 Tears is the rock and roll official song of Bay City.
It is,
correct?
yeah. It is the theme song for the rock and roll theme song, and they even got a display when we recorded 96 Tears. It was on Raymond Street, and that was on Shield Studios. Art Shield was the engineer, and he had a back room which was kind of like a recreation room. He had like a bumper pool table. We had to move the bumper pool table out of the way to record, and then he had the closet turned into like a little control room, and we recorded 96 Tears there. And I remember Rudy Gonzalez was our producer.
Yeah, I remember in 1996 when the band got back together. I was already publishing Mi Gente magazine. Yeah. You guys invited me to that session with Dick Fabian. Remember the from WNEM TV5, and it was the 30th anniversary of 96 Tears, and I got some great pictures of you guys. I think I had one here. It was around this time,
right?
And it was so nice to witness the memories that you had.
Yeah,
going back, and Eddie was with you.
Eddie was with
and Robert, of course, and little Frank. It just was a special time, and I remember the show on WNEM TV5, and I thought how great that after 30 years we could still celebrate this, and look at where we are now, 55 years later, Bobby.
I know. You know, now I was so sad that Eddie passed away. You know, he was like, when we traveled all over the world, all over the United States and stuff, he was kind of like our guardian, because me and Frankie were little kids.
Yeah.
I remember we played in New York City. We you know, they were older than us. You know, Robert, Frank Lugo, Eddie Serrata, question mark. They were either 18 and above, and me and Frankie were just 15 and 16. So it was like we couldn't hang out with them, you know, because in New York you could go to the bars at 18. So we had to stay at the hotel. so me and him, what we did, we ordered pizza. And we ordered Tom Collins drinks, and we signed away for him at the hotel.
Wow. So you mentioned Frank Lugo, and how did he actually come into the picture? Because I know he came later, but he
came later. But you know what? We considered him officially a band member, and that's why we stuck it out. You know, and Frankie Rodriguez, you know, he came later too. We didn't have a keyboard player then. You know, Dave Clark 5, and you know, the Animals had House Rising Sun, you know, and it had all these great keyboard sounds, you know. And I kept telling the guy that we got to get a keyboard player. So I told my brother, you know, he says, I know somebody. He says he knows a keyboard player, and he's about your age, Bobby. And I said, really? I said, can you get his number? You know, and I said, yeah. And so he got it. He got his Frankie's number, and I called, and I talked to his dad, and he goes, I said, is Frankie there? And his dad answered the phone. He goes, what do you want with him? You know? And I said, well, I play in a band, and we're looking for a keyboard player. And he told me, well, you know, Frankie is learning classical, and I wanted him to go to Las Vegas and be, you know, a famous player, you know. Yeah. I said, but, you know, if you wouldn't mind, I said, until he gets to that point, you know, we're looking for a keyboard player, and he was Mexican, you know, so we wanted to keep the band all Mexican. It wasn't like we were trying to be prejudiced like that, because we did have a friend of mine. He was white, and his name was Doug Clute, and he ended up leaving because his mom moved to Grand Rapids, so he quit the band. So we got Frankie in the band, you know, and he was just amazement, you know. I mean, Frankie, he was like, the knowledge he had in music, it was no comparison to any one of us that we knew. We all played by ear. I took a little bit of classical guitar, but nothing, you know. He was taught by the nuns. He said when he was playing the piano and he didn't fold his fingers right to come down on it, they would hit him with a ruler, you know. And he said so he learned how to play it right way. So, you know, adding Frankie to the band was a big plus, because 96 Tears, to me, the keyboard player is another big part of the song.
Wow. You know, well, today is a special day that we're recording this, and we're going on the live stream because it is Martin Luther King Day. It's a holiday here. And I just want to throw a question in that kind of relates to that, because, you know, you're talking about a memory right there with little Frank and all that. I mean, that's 60 years ago. Yeah. This is during the time of the civil rights movement. And it's kind of ironic that we're talking and, you know, all this, but we've got to mention the civil rights movement and Martin Luther King, because it's so important in our history. What do you remember about that time?
Well, I remember when our song was making it, you know, when I grew up in Michigan, there's prejudice all over the country, all over the world. It doesn't make a difference if you're Mexican or whatever. You go to Canada, you got the French and English, and they have this prejudice against each other. So it's just a normal human thing that that's there. So we went down to the South, and I could feel it really big, being Mexican, and I could see how the blacks were treated. There wasn't a whole lot of Mexicans, but you go to Georgia or Alabama, there wasn't. You can, but I could sense it because they would look at me weird, like where are you from,
Yeah.
and you could feel it. I never let it bother me because I try to see out the negative. I always try to look at the positive of the world, and I think when you do that, that's what you see. And I believe in being good and respectful, because I believe that when you treat people with respect, you get it back.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. And it just it behooves us to always remember the words of Martin Luther King and what he stood for in this nation. And here we are in 2022. Yeah. And we're still fighting that good fight. Much more so in the last couple of years, unfortunately. And I think many people in the 60s thought they were done. They were done with that, and the civil rights legislature got passed. And here we are, 2022, still fighting that. So let's keep that in mind today as we do the show on Martin Luther King Day, right. And remember, God created all men equal.
That's right.
So,
I totally believe that.
Let's talk a little bit about Robert Lee and your projects today, because that's part of the reason why we're here. Any Moment, this is the CD that Bobby has with the song Any Moment, and he's got another song coming out as well. Tell me a little bit about the two songs, that the one that's rising up the charts and the one that's coming out.
Yeah. Any Moment, a good friend of mine, Chad Cunningham, he promoted me when I had the Robert Lee Band, and we did an album. There was a song on there I really loved called Blues by Alvin Lee, and I did a cover of it. And the recording of it, a good friend of mine, Keith Lee, I can't remember his last name, Keith, he worked for Bay Music. And anyway, he was the engineer, and we did Blues. And that song really hit me. I was like, I sang it. I never considered myself a singer. I never really wanted to be, but I learned how to sing because when you're dealing with lead singers, sometimes they're hard to deal with, they get the front man and they get the ego and stuff like that, So I said, well, I better start singing so I can always do something on my own, So I learned how to sing, and I sang Blues, and I listened to it, I still can't believe I sang it, and there this response I get from it. And so, that started out. And so Chad Cunningham, he was like the promoter, and he does the River Roar in Bay City. He owns Prime Brothers. Just a great guy. Mm-hmm. Me and him are great friends, and we talk every so often, and I don't hang out with him, but, we have this respect for each other. And so he helped promote that album. But, playing blues is really hard. I give Larry McCray a lot of credit because when you think about it, when I was playing with Joe King in the 80s, we played in Florida, and I saw this piece of paper like Bob Martin's paper to review, and they were talking about Larry McCray playing this club. I said, I wonder if it's the same Larry McCray I know from Saginaw, because he worked at Steering Gear, and he's come up and jammed with me at Watermelon Sugar, so I didn't know how good he was doing. And he was traveling all over the country. And so I tried doing the blues, but I love blues guitar, but jazz has always been my favorite. And so I figured, we tried the blues, but there is no outlet really. You can play clubs, you can play all that stuff, big events, but there's only blues programs. Now, when you think about smooth jazz, there's smooth jazz radio. Play smooth jazz all day because people love to hear it. So
I don't mean to cut you off, but I want to make sure our listeners get a chance to hear at your song at Any Moment, because we're running out of time here, and I want to make sure that they actually hear the song. Okay. Let's hear it. That was Bobby's latest, called Any Moment, and he is climbing the charts, as we have said.
Yep.
And how does it feel after 55 years? You're climbing the charts again, and you've got such a long career, Bobby.
Right. You know, I've always loved jazz music, and when George Benson came in, he was smooth jazz, and I really fell in love with it because smooth jazz has a more beautiful sound to it, and the guitar playing is beautiful. So it was Chad Cunningham who hooked me up with that, and I came up with a song called "Happy and Go Lucky" on 2015, and he hooked up with a good friend of his, Gary Lekowitz, who worked for Sony Records, and me and Gary worked together on the song, and we became great friends. And then it only went to number 27. So what happened was nothing came about it. Then Gary got a hold of me 8 months ago, and he had asked me. He says, "Can you help me write a song?" And I go, "Yeah." He had this song. He had these 4 notes. If you listen to the song, do 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 do, that part right there, he came up with those 4 notes, and I put the song together, me and Frank, and I made a recording of it, and I sent it to him, and he told me we're gonna keep you in, the guys in there, but we're gonna put other musicians in there. So he did, and he put this trumpet player on there, amazing trumpet player, and the guy plays for CBS Morning News. If you listen to the Morning News, and there's a trumpet in there, and just amazing. And what he did to the song when I sent it to him, and he released, is a masterpiece.
Yeah,
just a masterpiece. And now it went number 1 on Media Base Smooth Jazz chart, and it's number 4 on Billboard.
yeah.
Number 4 on smoothjazznetwork.com. I hope it gets to number 1 on Billboard. I'm already happy because it already made number 1 on a big chart. I mean, the biggest chart the radio industry looks at. But Billboard, everybody knows about Billboard. It's more of an audience chart. And it's number 4 right now.
Well, you know, today we've got a glimpse of Robert Lee Balderrama, his hits, 96 Tears, and At Any Moment. And it's just a real honor for me to have you here, Bobby. You've been my friend for so long. Yep. And I just want to thank you. You are a son of Saginaw who happens to be a part of the American rock and roll story. So thank you, Bobby Balderrama.
And thank you, Larry.
And thanks to all my listeners and viewers as we continue on Mi Gente on Air, telling our stories and contributions. Thank you so much. Until next time, we've run out of time. I'm Larry Rodarte. See you next week. And we have so much to talk about with somebody like Bobby here. And I just want to give a little bit of extra to those of you who are tuned in on the live stream. Bobby has a event that he does, and I want him to talk about it because it really benefits the homeless. And I want you to share with the listeners exactly what that is, 96 Tears today.
Yeah, okay. I put this concert together in Bay City at the Winona Park downtown. It's called 96 Tears Day, a cry for the homeless. I'm aware of all the homeless because when I traveled with Question Mark, we played down in New Orleans when they had the hurricane, and people were homeless there that weren't because of the hurricane. They are. So I believe that the homeless people are really the hardest people to deal. You know, they're dealing with life and trying to go from day to day. You know, without a home. And to me, I think they deserve a home or shelter, and I believe in permanent shelter first. The first thing you got to do for homeless, permanent shelter, a home, you know, mini homes, whatever, apartment. Because once you put them in a home, guess what? They're not homeless no more. We can eliminate homelessness, you know, by that. I call it permanent shelter first, and then most of them will succeed and become citizens. A lot of them got put in that situation because of bad situations. So I put this concert on, and Question Mark Mysterians played at it, and the Mysterians and my smooth jazz band Robert Lee Review, and I want to do it every year as a tradition, and hopefully one of these days I'll get a national news to come out, and I can talk to the musicians across the United States, and you could do the same for your city, and make awareness and help your homeless. I think awareness has to be made so that when you look at a homeless person, you don't think of them as they're being lazy or drug addicts. Maybe they're drug addicts or alcoholics because they're depressed, because they got into that situation. If you go on YouTube and look at Skid Row in L.A., it would bring tears to your eyes because it did me. And I promised the Lord that I would promote this wherever I go. Radio stations, magazines. I want people to be aware, and musicians could be the ones that can make it happen.
Yes,
Thank
they
you.
can. Yes, they can. I also want to talk to you a little bit. I'm telling you, we got so much to talk about with Bobby here. But, Bobby, if many of you don't know, he's very spiritual.
Yep.
And he has had some real health issues in the last 5 years. And he's willing to share it with us, the listeners. And I feel really privileged that he's willing to do that, because he's got quite a story in regards to his faith and how he heard the Lord and he listened.
He did. One day it was late at night, and I used to meditate. I still do meditate, but I was meditating, and I was getting high. I was smoking some weed, and I love to meditate and get high, and I just really get into it. And it was late at night. My wife was sleeping, and I was in the bedroom in front of the computer, and all of a sudden, I had my eyes closed, and I saw these lights come on. I thought my wife got up to use the bathroom, and I opened up my eyes, and there was a spirit in front of me. It was the Lord, or the Lord sent somebody, archangel. I don't know who it was, but he said not to worry. And I looked at the spirit, and it was like a Roman outfit, like the gown you see that goes all the way down there, and they got the red scarf going all the way down to the side. And all I could see was bright light. It was so bright, it was unbelievable. And it said not to worry, and all of a sudden it was gone. And the next day I told my wife, I said, I think I'm going to quit getting high and meditating, And so after that, 3 months later, I got prostate cancer. And I've been in remission for 5 years. And then 2 years later, I had triple bypass. And then I got past that. And those two things, one after another, was the hardest thing to deal with, because your body gets so weak. My wife had to pick me up out of bed just to go use the bathroom. I could not even walk. And so I used to pray to the Lord. I said, Lord, please heal me. And he did. And now I have to have a heart valve repair. Mick Jagger had it done 6 months ago, and he's back in tour. And it's not open heart surgery, just a cath. But I got to have that done in 2 weeks. And I know the Lord's going to see me through this. And I promise the Lord, because I'm aware of the homeless, that I will never quit the rest of my life promoting and serving for the homeless, and to make people aware that they should not be in that situation. Our country is too rich to be in that country. If we can afford wars that we don't need, like Iraq, we can afford to help our own people. Especially a lot of homeless people are veterans. I call them heroes. They're our war heroes. Why? Because they went out there and fought in Iraq. They fought in Afghanistan. Maybe they fought in Vietnam. But some of them are homeless. To me, we can't allow that to happen. We should be there for them and to show them our love. Humans should love each other instead of create wars. But I believe the homeless are the hardest people dealing with a life from day to day. Can you imagine waking up next day when you're thinking about, what am I going to do? Where am I going to eat? So I promise the Lord, every day of my life, anytime I do a radio interview, magazine, I will promote the homeless.
Amen, brother. Amen.
Thank you.
And thank you for listening and listening to that message that was sent, that you're not to worry and have faith in God.
That's right.
And I think we all need to hear that, especially this day and age and this COVID pandemic as well. And it's just, I've known you a long time, Bobby. I knew that you were spiritual, and I'm so glad to see that you listen.
Thank you. I do.
Thank you so much. All right, everyone. I just wanted to share that as part of the show with those of you who are on live stream. Bobby has had so much to talk about tonight, and it truly has been an honor. And I've got one of the greats here in rock and roll history here on Mi Gente on Air, and I'm signing off now. So thank you again, Bobby Balderrama.
Thank you, Larry.
Thank you
for having me on your show.